Hello and welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman. I
don't think that's how you start the show, but it doesn't matter. We're going. We're going. It doesn't matter.
Right,
Go ahead.
Just fight through.
Ask me how I am, Tony. No. Wait, Tony. How's it going?
How dare you? It's going just fine, Tom. I assume you're doing well as well. Again, welcome back, but we already welcomed you back on the last show, so we don't need to do it. And see, this is the problem. You go away, and I forget how to do the show because I'm busy doing your show. A show where I botched the beginning plenty of times. You know, a couple times I forgot to say what day it was. I don't know that the days that the countdown I gave was correct because it was different than the countdown day that Keenan Bailey told us while he was walking past us at the Woody. So, but as I texted you the other day, hey, make sure you got your count right on the morning show, and apparently you think you do. But thank you for asking, Tom. Welcome everybody to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. Thank you for your patience in the beginning of this episode. The rest of the episode is going to go great. I promise you that. Tom, can you promise that?
I can't. I've learned not to make promises that I can't keep. Yeah, this is one of these episodes where, as Tony's trying to remember how to do his job, we're also trying to get caught up on all the stuff that happened while I was gone for basically 2 weeks. So we're going to be talking about something that Tony has gotten lots of messages. Why aren't you guys talking about this? Well, because Tom's somewhere. Tom has gone to a better place. Is he dead? No, Hawaii. It's fine. Anyway, doesn't matter. Yes, it was. So we're gonna be talking about some news that broke while I was gone, and which now I'm back to talk about. Thought about doing an emergency podcast, and I was like, well, no, this can wait. We're talking about 2024 and 2025. Yeah. There's plenty of time, Tony.
There's plus when we tried to schedule an emergency podcast, I did not realize there was a time further out than Pacific time, so we just kept confusing things. But we're here now to discuss the Big Ten schedule announcement from 2 weeks ago. We were all at Ohio State camp, I think, when this broke, and then so we're all like, those of us on the beat, like, see you at the Rose Bowl next year, finger guns, things like that. That was the first thing I'm looking for. Like, when is Ohio State playing USC? When are they going out? When are they playing UCLA? What were your first impressions of the schedule drop?
Well, my first thought was how interesting it was, because when they were looking at the different scheduling models, they were had talked about 3 protected rivals and 2 protected rivals and 1 protected rival and then like a variable protected rivals. And I remember thinking the variable model seemed just like you weren't going to be able to achieve any kind of equity in terms of teams playing kind of roughly the same difficulty of opponents from year to year. And I still think that's a little bit of a concern for me, but also I don't really have a big issue with how it shakes out the first couple years. So this may be something that works out okay, but I kind of want to see how it goes 2026, 2027, 2028 before I sort of give it the official stamp of approval. But I thought it was very interesting that you've got some teams, Iowa has 3 protected rivals, Penn State has none. That to me was really, really interesting.
Yeah. That was the other big thing, that Ohio State and Penn State were no longer protected rivals. For me, that was something that I kept saying when we were discussing these things. Like, I didn't think you needed to keep Ohio State and Penn State together. If you keep them together, that's fewer opportunities for Ohio State to play other schools. And so I was okay with that. And I'm sure Penn State, James Franklin and those guys were perfectly fine with it as well, because look how many times Ohio State has kind of ruined what they could be doing. So I was good with that. I think, where are you on that one?
I thought that was really interesting. I don't know. I think, how does Penn State feel about that? Probably depends on who at Penn State you ask. James Franklin getting Ohio State, who he hasn't beaten since 2016, off of his schedule on an every year basis. I'm sure he's probably not devastated by that. the ticket folks at Penn State. I mean, I'm going to read you Penn State's 2025 home schedule, and you tell me how excited the Penn State ticket office is. Nevada, Villanova, Illinois, Minnesota, Rutgers, UCLA. What's your big tentpole game there, Tony? Is it well, we haven't seen UCLA play here before, so it'll be really exciting to have. This is like when they had Minnesota as their whiteout game last year. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess, but there's not a lot of, yes, there's the big rivalry game with Rutgers, but there's really not a lot else you're going to really feel great about there as a marketing department. So, I think as a football team, it increases their chances of being 10-2, 11-1, and making a 12-team playoff. But, I don't know how great that is for the fans.
Schmans. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. I think looking at some of these schedules, like that schedule that you mentioned, they have 5 road games against, Big Ten opponents, including Michigan and USC that season. But I think it's also incumbent upon the programs themselves to give their fans better non-conference games. And Ohio State is certainly not doing that next year for Buckeye fans, and they're not alone in that. Michigan hasn't done it for the past two years. In fact, taking away a game against UCLA. And so that kind of thing irks me, but the influx of USC, UCLA is a net benefit for sure. Brings some more interesting games, although I would argue that Ohio State's schedule the next couple of years could be more interesting, and maybe the inclusion of Penn State in 2025 would help that. They are on the schedule next year, but I don't think it's a great like next year's home schedule being what it is with the 3 bad non-conference games for Ohio State and then Illinois, Iowa. Wait, am I looking at the right thing? Michigan, yeah, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Northwestern, Rutgers. Like you've got 2 Iowa and Michigan. Those are the 2 big games, and of course, Illabuck back, but not a great schedule. So, what do you think of Ohio State's slate these next couple of years?
Well, I think 2024 is kind of this weird outlier where they don't have a great non-conference game, because in 2025 you start the series with Texas. So, 2025, your home schedule, you don't have any great Big Ten games, but you've got Texas and USC coming to Columbus. So, okay, any great existing long-term Big Ten teams. USC, of course, a Big Ten game at that point. But those are, those are 2 kind of tentpole games for you. Anytime you got Michigan at home, that's going to be, that's obviously going to carry most of your schedule, and you're wanting to get tickets. But it's just kind of a weird 1-year gap between those. Was that the year that they canceled the Washington series?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So they should have had Washington, and you look at Washington coming in 2024. If that had happened, well, that's a team that is for all the times that Ohio State has scheduled Washington thinking they were getting a world beater, and ended up getting, the sad shadow of what the Washington program used to be. This was a time when you actually would have had it be the other way. You would have, oh my goodness, you finally get a good Washington team in, and then now that series got canceled because they were going to also be playing Texas one year. So, that's kind of a weird 1-year blip. But, the year after that, you get Texas and USC at home, and you're going to Wisconsin, you go to Michigan. I mean, there are, the 2024 schedule is probably about as soft as a Big Ten schedule is going to get at this point. You got Michigan at home, you got Penn State on the road. UCLA is probably your second most notable road game, and that's just because we get to go back to the Rose Bowl. So, that's about as easy a 2024 schedule as you're going to see. And of course, you're seeing now people, like the College Football Nerds Twitter account, which I really like their show, and I like those guys, but holding that up and like, well, people are dogging Georgia's 2024 schedule. Like, look at Ohio State's. It's like, well, okay, yeah, Georgia's looks like that every year. Yeah. Ohio State's looks like this as a 1-year blip because they had a series they canceled. So, that's probably, in a broader context, yeah, that's probably not a great example. But, that's as easy, like I said, a schedule as you're probably going to get. And you still have a home game against Michigan. You've got a road game against Penn State. Those are 2, even without a marquee non-conference games, those are two losable games, but you're at worst probably 10-2 at worst, and then you're in the playoff in 2024.
Which leads me to the next topic with this, because looking at these schedules, it looks to me like the Big Ten is trying to help what I call the top four, the big four of the Big Ten, and that would be Ohio State, Michigan, USC, and Penn State. Because at no point, as I look through, and at no point do any of those four teams play any of the other three in one season. You know what I'm saying? Like, so they only play two in each season, each of those four teams. And there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams, 9 programs in the Big Ten that will only play those four like once over those 2 seasons. They don't play 3. Some will play 3 in one season and 1 in the next, that sort of thing. Michigan State will play 3 of each, 3 of those 4 in each season, and they're the only Big Ten program that is being punished that way. But I think that's perfectly fine, Tom, because they have a $95 million coach. So you have more expectations for that program than for other programs. And so you would say, yes, you have to play these 3 this year, these 3 next year. And I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah, on a dollars per 30-point loss basis, I mean, you're really getting your money's worth there. So that's, yeah, they as a team that, is paying its coach in the Texas A&M tax bracket and is getting results in the Texas A&M tax bracket, I think that's an absolutely fair ask to have them have to face those teams. The team that jumped out to me as, oh boy, this team is diving into the deep end of the pool. USC's schedule. Have you looked at USC's 2024 schedule? Because they have a neutral site game versus LSU in Las Vegas, home games against Notre Dame, Michigan, Wisconsin, and then they go to Penn State. That is 5 losable games on that schedule. 2026, they have a home series with Ole Miss. They play Penn State at home. They go to Ohio State. They go to Notre Dame. That Notre Dame series that is an annual series they play. That is going to be a real challenge for them because they're going to play Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame, the home game in 2024 is November 30th. So that's the Saturday after Thanksgiving. That'll be the, Ohio State, Michigan week will also be Notre Dame, USC week. You're going to be pretty beat up at that point after playing a Big Ten schedule and not a Pac-12 schedule. I think USC, there were all those reports that Lincoln Riley was looking at Oklahoma in the SEC and going, I don't want to play that schedule. I don't know that he's got it any easier in the Big Ten than he would in the Pac-12 because we don't have dates on any of this. When is USC going to Penn State? Is USC going to Penn State on November 15th or on September 30th? Because that kind of changes my opinion on the difficulty of that game. When is Michigan going to, or USC going to Ohio State and Notre Dame in 2025? Notre Dame, they tend to schedule those games earlier in the season when they're at Notre Dame. I don't know that USC is going to get that benefit of the doubt when they come to Ohio State because sometimes teams can schedule things where every time Florida goes to Kentucky, mysteriously it's always in late September, early October, and it's never in late November. I don't know that USC is necessarily going to get the benefit of that doubt and get to sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, choose when they go play games in potentially cold weather areas.
I do wonder this USC Notre Dame, if they are going to continue their rivalry, continue the series, do they just keep it in September? That way USC doesn't have to deal with it. Because Notre Dame plays at USC like later in the year when they can get out there and for a warm weather November game, that sort of thing. I wonder if you just move that series to September. That way USC doesn't have to worry about them during the conference season. Although now with 16 teams, every week is the conference season. That's just the way it's going to be. So Tom, as I was putting together and looking at this schedule, I have assigned, I wanted to see who has the hardest slate, the easiest slate. And so what I did is I assigned all Big Ten teams a point value between 2 and 5. And so I gave Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, you can argue, and USC a 5. I made them 5s. And Wisconsin, I made a 4. Northwestern, I made a 4. Or not Northwestern, Iowa, I made a 4.
Can I just jump in and tell you, when I put together, like, I just kind of listed out the difficult opponents. I listed Iowa when you're at Iowa as a difficult opponent. I did not list Iowa when they're playing at home on the road as a difficult opponent. I think Iowa's a 4 at home and about a 2 on the road.
Yeah, and I also made UCLA a 4, and that's maybe a little bit of a projection. My 3s were everybody except for Rutgers and Indiana and Northwestern. So Rutgers, Northwestern, and Indiana were all 2s. Everybody else is a 3. If you're playing at that venue, I gave them a half point. So like at Michigan State is a 3.5. At Michigan State at your place is a 3. That sort of thing.
Okay.
And so then I went through and I said, who's got the most difficult schedule in 2024? Who's got the easiest? And who's got the toughest 4-game home slate, the toughest 4-game road slate? Like all of these different things, hot spots and cold spots. Nowhere in Ohio State's schedule did they have the hardest or the easiest anything. They're just like middle of the road. The average point values, like the average schedule point value, turns out to be a 32.8. Ohio State in 2024, their schedule is a 31, and 30 in the next year it's a 32.5. But interestingly, like a lot of the teams that have like the hardest, say road slate later on, they'll have like the easiest home slate or something like that. So I think the Big Ten and myself kind of had some similar point values, because I do believe they slotted everybody and gave them some sort of a point value. Here's one: Penn State in 2025. In my rankings, they have the hardest road slate and the easiest home slate to kind of even things out. Same thing with Michigan State in 2024. They've got the hardest 4-game road slate and the easiest 5-game home schedule. But in terms of next year, in 2024, the most difficult schedule is a tie between USC and Wisconsin. And you already mentioned USC's schedule in 2024, and you didn't even mention the road game at UCLA. And then Wisconsin, their 5-game road slate next year is Iowa, Maryland, Michigan, Nebraska, USC. Those are all 3 to 5s in my schedule. And so just some interesting things as I am the analytical portion of this show. And then, some like Penn State's road schedule next year is it's just 4 games and it's the easiest of anybody. So congratulations, Penn State. The Big Ten does not hate you. As you said, you are unrivaled, and you've got a good road slate of Indiana, Purdue, Rutgers, and Wisconsin next year.
What's kind of interesting about this whole conversation is there are teams that would prefer to have all their hard games at home, and there are teams that would prefer to have all their hard games on the road and their easy games at home. Because if you're Ohio State, you want those hard games at home because you're going to beat the teams on the road. You're going to beat more or less anyone you play on the road, with maybe one exception a year. So you want those tough games at home if you're Ohio State. If you're Indiana, anytime you go on the road, you sort of assume it's going to be a loss. Now, they're not going to say that out loud, but reality says what reality says. So if you're Indiana, you'd rather have your easy games at home, because then you can, if you get Indiana playing Rutgers at home, you probably just sort of as a blind, I tell you nothing else, but Indiana has Rutgers at home. You're probably saying, okay, Indiana's probably a slight favorite in that game. If Indiana has to go to Rutgers, well, then Rutgers is probably a slight favorite in that game. If you're Indiana, you're looking for any win you can get. And if you can get 6 easy games at home and get to your 6 wins and get to a bowl game, well, that's a great season. So, as far as the teams we're talking about for the most part in this, those are teams that want to have those difficult games at home. You can play your easy games on the road, and that's fine. And you're going to, you would rather have the advantage in the games that you have a chance to win at home. Ohio State playing Michigan, Ohio State would rather play Michigan at home than on the road, because that's going to be one of those talent is equated kind of games. So that's, I think, something that's kind of interesting in that. And, Penn State, Penn State has, really that 2025 schedule, I mean, you said easiest home, which I went through that whole list, and then toughest on the road at Iowa, at USC, at Michigan. You have 3 losable games on your schedule, and they're all on the road. That is a rough schedule. But then 2024, on the other hand, they get Ohio State at home, they get USC at home, and they're at Wisconsin. So it feels like the Big Ten made an effort to make this fairly equitable. And I think you're right. I think they probably did something along these lines to try and score it and try and make it as reasonably balanced as you can be, because you don't want to have Penn State going to USC, to Michigan, to Wisconsin, to Ohio State in the same year, because then you've basically doomed them just on schedule release day to being maybe an Outback Bowl kind of team. So this reflects, I think, the Big Ten kind of continuing to be a little bit more strategic in its scheduling than it has been in the past. I think we've gotten on the Big Ten about their scheduling in the past, and not helping out its teams in the way that the SEC sometimes helps out its teams with their scheduling. But again, we'll see. A lot of this is going to be dependent on, okay, what order are these games? Because we don't have the order yet. We just know the home games and the road games. If Penn State is playing home games against Ohio State and USC, but it's doing it in back-to-back weeks, well, that's not nearly as big an advantage as if they have an off week before they have Ohio State or something like that.
Penn State with the easiest schedule among the Big Ten teams, and the easiest slate of Big Ten games in 2024 by far. One thing, the 2024 rankings that I did, there are 4 teams that have scores under 30, and the 2025 rankings, no teams have scores under 30. So to me, it also looks like the Big Ten was like, we're going to ease everybody in a little bit, and then everybody's going to have to kind of carry more weight in 2025. As I said, Ohio State has no part of their schedule is the toughest or the easiest. There is one part of Michigan's schedule that stands out. In 2025, they have the easiest road schedule in either of the 2 years, tied with Purdue this year, or in 2024. In 2025, they have Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, Michigan State, Nebraska. That's the easiest 5-game road slate for Michigan. So we'll see how easy it is then. There's Matt Rule will probably get things going a little bit. And who knows where Iowa is at that point? Who knows where Maryland is at that point? But right now, the only superlative for Michigan's schedule is that they've got a pretty easy road slate in 2025. The most difficult schedule that I have here in 2025 belongs to those Michigan State Spartans. So
Michigan State is in a tough spot because their protected rival Michigan is all of a sudden one of the top 5 teams in the country most years. And you're going to play Penn State, Ohio State, Wisconsin, USC on a somewhat frequent basis. So that's just, you're in a tough spot. And, I think the thing with Ohio State is Ohio State's not going to have as tough a schedule as other teams because Ohio State doesn't have to play Ohio State. And Michigan's not going to have as tough a schedule as other teams because Michigan doesn't have to play Michigan. So, you're going to play the other one, every year, but you're not playing both of those teams in any given year. So that's one thing. And another thing that's worth noting on Michigan is we have slagged Michigan for their non-conference schedule the last couple of years because Michigan canceled the non-conference season schedule with UCLA the last couple of years and has just had absolutely garbage non-conference schedules, like 2 of the worst non-conference schedules in the nation in 2022 and 2023. 2024, they got a home game against Texas. 2025, they've got a road game at Oklahoma. I mean, that's that is some big boy non-conference scheduling, and good for them for doing that, because I think the removal of the UCLA series probably helped get Michigan over the hump where you weren't at any real risk in losing 2 games most of those years, as it sort of turned out, because you played no one non-conference and had a lot of time to sort of ramp things up. Good for them for now actually playing real games out of conference, because that was a 2024 home against Texas, Wisconsin, at Ohio State and USC for Michigan. And then 2025, you mentioned, Iowa's really their only kind of remotely difficult home game that year, but They go, I'm sorry, Iowa's their only remotely difficult road game in 2025. They also go to Oklahoma. So, I mean, I think the Brent Venables era at Oklahoma is still a little bit TBD how that's going to look and how that's going to go. But, boy, Ohio State plays home against Texas. Michigan plays at Oklahoma. I guess we're going to find out, Tony, in 2025, whether Oklahoma and Texas are really SEC teams or whether it doesn't count yet.
Very, very true. I can't wait to find out if that counts. Because Ohio State's wins over Missouri back in the 90s did not count as wins over the SEC. Their win over Texas A&M in a bowl game did not count. And even their win in 2010 over an SEC team did not count. So perhaps they can finally get something to count coming up. And then, of course, in 10 years, Michigan and Notre Dame restart their rivalry again. So that'll be fun. And we're saying all of these as if Michigan is actually not going to cancel any of these series, which we'll see.
Got to give them credit while you can give them credit. And, if they remove those, then, we'll see. And, I think it's also worth mentioning, while the Big Ten is this is the Big Ten schedule. Boy, Tony, the SEC, the brave, courageous warriors of the SEC, too scared to play a non-conference team schedule. And what was fascinating to me about that was, Nick Saban is loudly arguing for a 9-conference game schedule. And it's the Kentuckys of the world who they just want to get their 7 wins, and 4 of them are going to be non-conference wins. And they don't want to give that up because, boy, if you have to play a tougher schedule, well, then you're going to win fewer games. And, the Big Ten playing 9 conference games, and, we're going through that. Not, all the SEC fans are going to tell you, well, Alabama just plays Georgia 12 times. It's like, that's not actually true. But, you go through there are 3 to 4 really good top 15 kind of teams on a lot of these schedules, virtually all of these schedules every year. That's the kind of schedules that SEC teams have been getting gassed up for years. And that's not even most SEC teams don't necessarily even play that, especially teams on the eastern side of the traditional schedule there. So, Georgia is not playing 4 top 15 teams a lot of years because the SEC East is just kind of weaker top to bottom. So, I think this is going to balance out the Big Ten a little bit, where some of those Western teams, the teams that have been Western before, which there's no more divisions, so now there is no East and West. But I think those Western teams are going to be playing tougher schedules. The Eastern teams are going to be playing, maybe not as top heavy of a schedule, where Ohio State has played, you play Michigan and Penn State every year. That's 2 top 10 teams. And then you've also got Maryland and Indiana and Rutgers. And it's just going to kind of balance out where your average opponent is probably better because you're playing more of those kind of like 7-8 win caliber teams during the course of a season. So I think this is a good thing overall, and maybe best of overall, Tony. We don't need to watch the Big Ten West come into the Big Ten championship game and be a sacrificial lamb anymore. That might be the best thing of all.
And that leads me to my next thing, Tom, because you have people who think or who believe and who say that Michigan and Ohio State being in a situation where they would play back-to-back will diminish the rivalry. And I'm of the opinion that we have no idea how we are going to feel about that until we are actually in the middle of it. We can say all of these things. Like, I think you're not going to want to lose the first one. And then if you lose the second one, it doesn't, then it kind of doesn't matter what happened in that first one, because either you won the first one and lost the second one to cancel out the first win, or you've just, doubled up on somebody. But you're not going to want to lose any of those. I think right now we have no idea how our ideas we don't know how accurate they're going to be in terms of when we're really in there. And I equate it to how, like, when you start watching the game and you don't care who wins, you have no idea who you're rooting for, but then you eventually find yourself pulling for one team. I think we're not going to know what to feel, what to think, and how things are until we're really in it. Where are you?
Yeah, it feels like this is one of those things where, yes, on a historical basis, this is going to make the regular season game potentially less meaningful, because I don't think you're going to ever have an Ohio State or Michigan team basically resting their starters for the first game because, well, we're going to get to the Big Ten championship game either way. So that's the only one that really matters. I think they're both going to matter. It's just the dynamic there is going to be so weird. The first time Ohio State plays Michigan and one of those teams wins, and you have one of those teams wins, and normally it's this cathartic moment and the culmination of a year of hard work, and oh boy, we're going to enjoy this one for 24 hours. And then you walk out of that stadium, and then you got to go get ready for the same team again. And it's going to happen. It is just based on the historical results from those two teams. That is going to happen at some point. And I think, just focus on the idea of how much fun it would be for your team to beat the other team 2 weeks in a row. You beat them once, and then, okay, we're going to come back and we're going to battle back, and we're going to, and then you end up eating the curb again. That, I think, would be, a whole lot of fun for one team and not at all fun for the other. If those teams do split, though, Tony, I think that makes it more likely that both of them make a 12-team playoff, because it's, if you just think about how the narrative is. Well, this won't be the narrative on ESPN now that they're not a TV partner of the Big Ten, but think about how the narrative is shaped around those teams. It's like, you got to look at the quality wins, look at the top 25 wins. Michigan, on those college football playoff conference calls, you got to look. Ohio State has a really high quality win over Michigan, and then Michigan came back the next week and has a really high quality win over Ohio State. You can tell these two teams are very evenly matched, and we know they're both great, so therefore they both deserve a spot. I feel like if you've got two teams that are, Ohio State loses an early season game and Michigan loses an early season game, and then they split the games later, that I think is going to be something that really, really gives both of them, obviously the team that wins the Big Ten championship game is gets one of those top 4 seeds in this thing. But I think the other team, just having that late season win over the Big Ten champion, I think that probably gives them a ton of cred as well, where you're getting in as a 10-2 and maybe even a 9-3.
Yeah, and I think the Big Ten kind of wants them to split those two games as they happen, because it will be helpful. But I also think you could have situations where Ohio State needs to beat Michigan to be able to play Michigan in the Big Ten championship game, or Michigan needs to beat Ohio State to be able to play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. So in that manner, it will still mean everything to that team. And then also you could have a situation where an 11-0 or a 12-0 is facing an 11-1 or 10-2, and it's like, if we beat Michigan here, we're going to knock them out of the playoffs. If we beat them in the Big Ten championship game, wouldn't that be tremendous? Just knock them out, keep them from the playoffs. There's still going to be plenty of incentive, and you're always playing for the seeding and the buys, and there's plenty of all of that on the line. But the thing that you said, imagine the devastation of losing twice in 1 year like that. Can you even come back from that the next year? That would be so. And we've seen what it's like around here with 2 losses in 2 years. Imagine the washing away of all sins, basically, if you can beat the other team twice in 1 year. The old saying, if Ohio State could go 1-11, but if that one is Michigan, Ohio State could go 2-10, but if those 2 wins, 2-11, they could somehow make the Big Ten championship game as a 1-11 team and make it to 2-11 with 2 wins over Michigan. But 2 wins, 2 losses, that would have to qualify for the best and worst season ever for somebody.
Well, and first of all, think about if you're the team that loses both of those games and then you're going to the Outback Bowl the Citrus Bowl, you're going to sell 4 tickets to your fans. 4 tickets. That's going to be the most demoralized fan base. Those other non-playoff games are already going to be even less meaningful than they are now. You're going to have the least enthusiastic fan base in history. That's one thing to think about. Here's the other thing. You could beat a team 3 times in a season now, right? You could play Michigan on Thanksgiving weekend. You could play Michigan the week after that. And then you could play Michigan. I'm sure they would seed things to not have those 2 teams play each other in the first or second round. But there's a way you play one of the, those teams could meet again in like the semifinals or something like that. Or, Tony, can you even imagine the third time those teams are facing each other? They've split the first two, and the third time they're facing each other is in the national championship game. I mean, we almost had that last season. Both teams came pretty darn close. Can you imagine the third time those teams are playing? I don't think anyone would be arguing that the game isn't all that meaningful at that point. So, and then the chance to beat a team 3 times in a season. Oh man, the first one of it doesn't even matter which one. One of those teams becomes the first team in college football history to beat an opponent 3 times in one season. That would be, the like 2004 Red Sox coming back from 3-0 in the ALCS against the hated Yankees. That would be like the college football version of that, where you would just fold your program. You will never come back from that.
That opportunity to basically right the wrongs of the first 2 games, it's some Avengers Thanos level. Let's just turn the clock back a little bit, because if you win that third game, it doesn't matter what happened in the first 2 games. And we have proof of this because back in 1992, when Ohio State and Michigan in basketball, Ohio State beat Michigan twice during the regular season, but in the Fab Five, that was the Fab Five team, the tournament of 92, when Michigan beat Ohio State to go to the Final Four. And so it doesn't matter that Ohio State swept them in the regular season. That loss in the tournament sent Michigan to the Final Four, sent Ohio State home, and was devastating for a young teenager like myself. But yeah, you're living the high life, and you're like, yeah, like Ohio State fans being, if we beat Michigan, in Ann Arbor, then we beat them in Indianapolis, and then you're looking at the bracket, and it's just going to be amazing the first time we actually get to see this bracket, and you're like, oh, Michigan in, I don't know, the Rose Bowl. I don't know where the championship game would be that year, but then you lose that game, and it's, what's the point of, just, it would be done. There's so much opportunity for devastation here. I don't know how people can be against it.
Exactly. The emotional stakes of all of these games are just so high. And, this is going to make any individual, the current Ohio State Michigan setup is that the entire season, it's a 1-game season. How many often have we heard 1-game season? Well, now it might literally be a 2-game season or a 3-game season all against the same team. So yeah, the stakes of that are going to be probably a little lower, but the stakes of, you get more, you get extra. And I think that's going to be, this is not a college basketball thing where it's like, oh, the meaningfulness of UNC and Duke is not what it doesn't really matter because it's too, they play twice a year. It's not as meaningful. That's the college basketball regular season. Like, this is the college football, basically playoff play-in, and then Big Ten championship game, and then potentially the college football playoff too. Those are all going to be extremely meaningful games for both teams. And, boy, my favorite game to watch every year is Ohio State, Michigan. My favorite place to watch a game anywhere in the world is the Rose Bowl. So Ohio State, Michigan in the Rose Bowl, I might just explode. That might just be that's the end of Tom, just Scanners style. Just nope. College football excitement overload. Like, nope, can't do it.
May I suggest, if this were to ever happen, both teams home jerseys?
Oh man, 100%, 100% that would need to happen. And yeah, that would be, on because they're still doing it on New Year's Day, right? So it's like a playoff semifinal or whatever it is. And it's right. Am I remembering the college football playoff format correctly? Yeah. Yeah. College football playoff semifinal in the Rose Bowl on New Year's afternoon and a perfect sunny day, both teams in home jerseys. Holy smokes. That would be also, Tony, what would those teams split the first 2 games? What are the TV ratings for a college football playoff semifinal between those 2 teams? Whatever the record is, I'm betting the over.
Whatever the record is, double it. But this reminds me of one of America's favorite games, and that's the hole-in-one game on The Price is Right. And, you guess the cost, the prices of shopping items, and that allows you to get a foot or so closer to the hole. And then you would putt and you would miss it. And then in 1986, Tom, they introduced the second chance. And in 1986 was the internet all like, this is terrible. This is how outrageous. This is supposed to be hole in one. But in 1986, it became hole in one or two. And do we complain about it? Are there hardliners now saying, the game has lost its luster? No. Has the punch board lost its luster because you get 5 chances to punch out a hole? No, it makes things better. And as I've always said, college football is like The Price is Right. And the more closer you get to guessing the items of the goods, the better you are. Have I not said this, Tom?
You say that constantly. And I remember you saying that, Michigan and Ohio State playing in the college football playoff would be like the CFP, the folks who run the CFP spinning the wheel, but every space on the wheel is $1. Wow, again, wow, amazing. You won so many prizes. Yeah, that's when the TV network executives are drawing up these contracts and paying, exorbitant amounts of money for just 1 or 2 football games, or, now more than that, but that's what they are banking on. We've seen in the past, the reason the stupid Legends and Leaders divisions got done in the first place 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago at this point, 15 years ago, was because putting Ohio State and Michigan in opposite divisions at that point, I think, was worth an extra $1 million a year, just on the off chance you'd have Ohio State and Michigan play in the Big Ten championship game. Now the TV contracts are, multiples of what they were 15 years ago. Just the chance to have Ohio State and Michigan play in a college football playoff game, or Georgia and Ohio State, or Alabama and Michigan, or, any of these combinations of like these enormous brands, Texas, USC, that is going to be, that is when TV executives lay down at night and have, the wonderful dreams about winning the lottery, like that's what that looks like. It's Ohio State and Michigan playing in the Rose Bowl in the college football playoff semifinals.
Yeah. And it would be first time you ever get to really see them play under the lights. In 2006 was a 3:30 kick, but, and it would be, the Rose Bowl, not necessarily, but at some point they're going to be playing at night. And that may be another factor that people will be excited about. So yeah, will it diminish the games before? A little, but will you know it at the time? Not necessarily. And then it's just going to continue to build and build. So, I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, we'll know more about how things are after the fact and during the fact, and still doesn't keep me from looking forward to it even more. Tom, anything else before we go?
No, I think we're also maybe slightly blinded by the fact that we're in the part of the calendar where any college football sounds great. It's like, you know what? It'd be great right now. Some Ohio State Rutgers. That would be tremendous. I would love to see an Ohio State Rutgers game this weekend. But it is definitely going to be different. It's going to be new. Change is the only constant in sports at this point, and it's very easy to say everything's getting worse. Maybe in some ways, but in other ways, no. So you get more meaningful college football games this way. So you'll either enjoy it or you won't. But my advice would be to just enjoy it.
And if things don't go well, they'll just send it back to 4 games, because we know college football, the thing they love to do most is reduce the schedule if things aren't going well. So they'll just go back to 4, maybe make it 11 game regular season, and just scrap the conference championship games altogether for the sake and the health of the players. But that will do it for today. I want to thank you all for joining us. As a reminder, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Great time to become a member for the monthly cost of, as Tom says, a lousy chain store pizza. We have differing tastes in pizza, but he's not wrong, basically, because there are some lousy pizzas out there. Also, you can find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Subscribe if you haven't. Hit the bell to be notified when we drop videos like this, or when we go live, or when we drop in camp videos, interviews, all kinds of things like that. Also, Facebook.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well, if you're a Facebook person. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.